Why is it so that you always run away? Why is it so?
Hey guys, welcome to Frank's Tech Help. So today I'm going to be replacing the Spur gear in the Traxxas Rustler 4x4 VXL. Unfortunately, mine didn't last very long. Made it about 3 days. In fact, I think I had a combined total drive time of less than 3 hours before it disintegrated inside of the rear differential. Well, not the differential, but the rear housing system for the pinion and spur gear. Alright, so for the top 3 screws that hold the pinion and spur gear cover on, you're going to use a hex 2.0, and let's get it the right angle here so you guys can just kind of see that as I'm taking it out. Okay, so now that I have the 3 screws out, I just wanted to show you real quick. The 2 screws that go on the outer part of this cover are the long ones. The short one goes into the middle right here, so just make sure that you take note of that as you're doing your disassembly and reassembly. Let me go ahead and remove the cover here from the pinion and spur gear area. Try to work around my wiring here for my lights. Alright, so one other thing, you'll also want to loosen up the motor mount right there just a little bit to push it out and disconnect the pinion from the spur gear right there. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen that. And this is also a 2.5 hex bolt. So you just want to loosen it enough to give yourself some play right there on the motor as far as that goes. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 top right here. Alright, so I've got the 2 screws removed from the additional 2 spots that I showed you there just a few minutes ago, right there and there. I'll set those aside. Now, in addition to that, and releasing the motor there, you do want to come in and you want to, let me rotate this, you want to rotate this until you see your screw right there on the rear of the drive shaft. Just get it at an angle there so you can see what's going on. Loosen that up just enough to get it to start moving around. So from there, you can flip the car over. Actually, let me go ahead and remove my battery out of here. Go ahead and flip the car over here. And then going back to your hex 2.5, we're going to remove the 2 bottom screws right here. So I have the 2 screws removed out of this area, and just make a note that the 2 screws that go on the bottom are longer than the 2 that you just pulled out from the top. I'll give you a little bit, not by much, but enough to mistake it. You see those 2 next to each other right there. So the 2 that go on the top are the 2 shorter, and they are a lot more beefy than the 3 first ones that you took out. You can tell the difference there. Alright, so at this point we should just be able to slide this back off, but because of my wiring, I want the spur gear assembly to stay in place while I slide this back out. So I'm just going to use a little spudger here to kind of keep this pushed forward while I pull this back. There. Alright, perfect. So there you have, and I'll just flip it over so you can see it, the entire back end of the vehicle right there. Disconnect. So I really do like the design of this because it is easy access. So, oh wow, look, I don't know if you guys can see all of that or not. Yeah, there's a bunch of shavings from the old spur gear. I've already blown quite a bit of it out of this unit, but wow, there's still apparently quite a bit left in there. So I'm going to take a little hand air here and just clean everything, kind of blow this debris out of the way. So get rid of this first. So you just want to go in and make sure there's nothing in there. Alright, I think that's good. I'm just going to hold the drive shaft here by the base drive shaft mount, and you may have to twist it just a tad bit to get it to loosen up, but there. So after that, pretty much pops right out. Traxxas, in the little toolkit that they provide you, It does have a little wrench. You can use a deep socket set on the end of this if you want. Not sure if I can get that in the light properly, but there is a flat edge that goes into the rear differential. It's flat on both sides, so just grab it right there. And then you're going to come in, make sure you have a good grip on it there. You're going to just come in and loosen this. A deep socket is probably the best job for this right here. Go ahead and finish taking this top bolt off and set it aside. We'll set it right there. And you want to make sure that this all goes back into place the same way that it came off. So for me, I'm going to face everything down so I can pick it up and go back that direction. And then from there, you're going to carefully slide off your slipper clutch assembly right there. And yeah, these kind of fell out of the way there, but I'll pop them back in once I get back to that. So there are the little pieces for your slipper clutch there, and those just drop in to right there. And you will want to pay attention, like if you notice, look at them closely, you'll see that they're scraped up on one side. If you can see that closely enough, that's the side that's going to go against this disc right here when you put it back together. So we'll go ahead and set this aside for the moment. And then from there, you are going to have another center bearing, but we'll take care of that here in just a second. And the inner 3 bolts, you're going to remove these, and these are it's a hex 2.5 once again. So you're just going to remove those 3 carefully. Alright, so after you get your 3 screws out, you do want to use something. You could use a screwdriver tip or something a little wider, but you want to push the bearing out of the center of that and just keep note of which side is which when you push it out of there. So I'm going to pop it down and drop it out into my hand right there, so you can see that it's gone from the front now. Alright, so after this is removed, you can see on the back side of this the little indentions right there where these drop down into that. And so if you're replacing this with another plastic one, just make sure that the writing is on the outside and that the back end of this goes in to that, like that right there. And you're going to insert the back plate edge for your slipper clutch. And when you go up here, just make sure that the holes align properly. I'm going to go ahead and put my bearing back in to the new housing. So drop this clutch plate off there and just center that up. Make sure that it's flush. You can go ahead and just lightly tap in your 3 screws here just to keep the back part of that assembly together, keep it aligned if you want. And once this first one kind of locks into place, just gets barely tight, you want to go ahead and do the other 3. Get them just right up to the surface. Don't tighten them down yet. Just leave it kind of just enough to give it a little bit of play, because you want to make sure this is aligned properly once you're done. So when I flip it over, I'm not sure if you can see this, but I do still have a little bit of play in the back plate of that. There's a plate back here that you have to watch out for. If you look, I'm just going to lay it on here disaligned. So what's going to happen if you put this on wrong is this whole plate's going to be able to slide, and it's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be locked in. I don't know, see if you can see the 4 little lock points right there. These are raised above the surface, so when you go to put it in, just make sure it doesn't slide freely like that. You want to make sure it locks down into those little grooves like that. So now here's the tricky part. Once you get the pads back on the back of the clutch assembly here, you need to put this back together, but if you turn both of these parts, this ring's going to fall off and it's going to lose its alignment, or the disc, the parts of the disc are going to fall off. So just kind of grab it by the side right there and make sure that it's lined up properly. And then from there, you can just go straight down into it. Just make sure that it's, I'm not sure if you can get that at the right, see that at that angle or not, but So just let it drop straight back into place like that. And as you can see, it does spin on the back side of that the clutch assembly there. From there, we want to go ahead and come back in now that we know that everything's properly aligned on the center of this axle right here. You can come back in with your hex bolt or hex drive. Get that pop back in there. And then tighten these down, kind of like you would do a head gasket. You are going to alternate the screws, so give one kind of a little bit of a tightening there, and then come over to the next one, tighten it a little bit, go to the next one, tighten it a little bit, and just kind of work your way around, and then observing to make sure that everything, you know, looks fairly well in alignment. It shouldn't be off by more than just a fraction as far as that goes. So there, we can go ahead and give it a good tightening. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the inner ring back in, and you can see that's kind of almost a cone shape on one side. That does go in towards the plate like that right there. And then from there, you come back in, put your spring on, and then you're going to put your bolt on the end of that. And just make sure, once again, just to kind of hold everything together so you don't lose those little plates from the inside. And you're going to come in and tighten this down. Okay, so after that point, you should still have a little bit of movement in the back plate on the slipper clutch there. Be able to move that just a little bit like that, but it needs to have that tension on there in order to kind of lock down against the plate. So here we have the car. I'm just going to take this just straight up like this as it is and slide it back up into this assembly. And you want to go ahead and realign it with your rear drive shaft there. Slide that into place. Then from there, you're going to come back in carefully. And the main thing is that you want to align your rear differential with the two flat parts of this. So when you go to reinsert this, see if you can get that in the light there. When you go to reinsert this, you need to make sure those two flat sides fit properly into that rear differential. Go ahead and start kind of working that back into place. And as you do, you want to move your tires a little bit, and then you're going to feel it lock in. And remember, the two longer bolts that you pulled out go on the bottom, the two shorter ones go on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and line these up here, screw these back into place. So now that I have the two bottom screws back into place, I'm going to come back up here and put the two in the top right there. And when you think you're done screwing on this, you have to keep going. It just keeps going. Seems like it goes forever, but it is fairly well precisioned as far as being able to screw that down nice and tight without stripping anything. So you want to align this to where you've got, you know, you don't want to go too far out because it's going to slip off the drive rod back there. But if you go too far back, it's going to put too much pressure. It's probably going to rip the end of this aluminum right here. So when you go all the way back, just come in just a tiny bit like that. So if you want to check that, you can just kind of slide it back, get an idea of where it goes, kind of mark that mentally. All right, and because I've had so many issues with this bolt slipping, I mean, it's happened like 5 times, no matter, you know, I come back in here and crank that sucker down and tighten it up, and I take a couple of hard hits, whatever, and it's loose again, and then all of a sudden this thing is just spinning freely and it keeps disconnecting as far as that goes. So what I'm going to do, just to give it a little extra boost, is I'm going to put a drop of super glue, professional strength super glue, down in here, just to lock this into place a little bit better. You know, trying a new screw isn't really helping me at this point. Short of getting a whole new rear end mount with a new screw and everything, this is just going to be my little cheat for this to help me secure this into place. So I'm going to put a drop of super glue on the flat edge right there where it slides back around that, and then I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 drops on the inside, and then make sure that you push it back, it's on the flat edge, and you got enough clearance right there that you want, and then go ahead and start tightening it down Once again, try to slide forward, make sure that you've got it on that flat edge and that your clearance is clear. This can be kind of tricky, just a tad bit. So you've got the clearance, it's locked in. I'm going to go ahead and drop the screw down in there and get it locked into place. Now that the glue has dried, I've got the bolt put back into place. Hopefully this time it's not going anywhere. If I still have issues with it, then I'll just end up replacing this rear mount, getting some new screws, whatever it takes to solve that problem. And so from this point, you're going to need to come in and realign your motor to get proper tension on the back of this drive shaft. So we'll go ahead and do that. You want to go ahead and put your pinion / spur gear cover back into place. When you slide it under my wiring there and get it over the housing. So lock that back down into place and go ahead and put your 3 screws back in. And once again, we're going to move back down to the 2.0 hex to put these screws back in. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that real quick. Make sure that the short one out of the 3 goes into the middle right there. I've got everything locked down now, battery's in, turn the unit on, give it a little test spin here and let you guys see. You want to listen to the gear and also watch this drive shaft, make sure everything looks good on that. There we go, all right, good deal. One last thing that I will note is I have test driven this since performing this repair, and the super glue on the rear drive shaft holding that pin in, as I mentioned before, it kept popping off. I didn't really want to hold. This has worked perfectly. So that is a great solution on that. If you ever need to remove it, drop a couple of drops of acetone, aka fingernail polish remover. My wife has a ton of it. Just drop a couple of drops on there and let it soak for a minute before you remove that bolt if you need to remove it in the future, and that'll take care of that problem. Some of you might notice that when I go to put the spur gear back in, that I'm using something that looks a little bit different, and it is the hardened metal spur gear. It's the 50-tooth hardened metal spur gear for this, and I highly advise against using it. If your spur gear, if it grinds out, just replace the plastic spur gear. You're going to be a lot happier in the end because the plastic keeps everything cool. If you put the metal in here, it might, it's good for straight up street runs and stuff like that, but you want to do it in intervals because it will cause this to overheat. And after about 4 or 5 minutes, your motor's going to shut down. The ESC is going to start blinking red, and you'll have to let it cool off before you can run it again. Plus, it drains the battery fairly quickly. Lesson learned on my part. I thought, great, I'll upgrade to a metal spur gear. No, not so fast. So kind of in hindsight now, you want to stick with the plastic as far as that goes. That's my advice on replacing the rear spur gear on the Traxxas Rustler 4x4 VXL. As always, thanks for watching Frank's Tech Help. Peace.
Why is it sad?